opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday the 10th. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
So, Donald Trump has sexually assaulted a writer. This is the finding of a jury in a civil case. He says he's never even met E. Jean Carroll and calls it a witch hunt. But is his bid to retake the White House now doomed?
And it's the will of the people. The Home Secretary tells the House of Lords not to block her illegal migration bill. Widespread opposition expected, and it's going to be led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, fresh from the coronation.
The latest Harry hacking case. This time, the Prince is taking action against Mirror newspapers. We're going to be live at court.
And Labour under pressure over what we call a coalition of chaos. Sir Keir Starmer's refusing to rule out a deal with the Lib Dems.
Get involved with the conversation this morning. gbviews at gbnews.uk is the email address, or you can tweet us at gbnews. But first of all, here is your news with Bethany Elsey.
Good morning. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 9:30. A US jury has found former US President Donald Trump sexually abused a magazine writer in the 1990s and then defamed her by branding her a liar. He must now pay nearly £4 million in damages to columnist E. Jean Carroll. Mr. Trump will not face a prison sentence as the trial was a civil case. Following the verdict, Ms. Carroll said it was a victory for every woman who suffered because she was not believed. Mr. Trump has called the verdict a disgrace and said he will appeal. Doctors and nurses will soon be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and a third of nurses could be trained via the apprenticeship route in the coming years. The head of the NHS says this gives an opportunity for school leavers to earn while they learn. The expansion of apprenticeships is also said to offer an alternative to the traditional university degree. The UK is set to make Russia's mercenary Wagner Group a proscribed terrorist organisation. That's according to the Times newspaper, which says the move is likely to happen within weeks. The Wagner Group has been fighting alongside Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. The decision will mean it'll be a criminal offence to join and support the group. It'll also apply to displaying its logo in public or attending its meetings. Similar proscribed groups include the Islamic State and neo-Nazi group National Action. Longer lorries will be allowed on British roads under new government plans to carry more goods with fewer journeys. It'll mean HGVs can be up to 2 metres long, with a maximum length of up to 61 feet or 18.5 metres. The government says drivers will be able to move the same amount of goods, up to 44 tonnes, but will use 8% fewer journeys. The vehicles will be allowed on roads from the 31st of May. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, it's an extraordinary story. A jury has found Donald Trump sexually abused magazine writer E. Jean Carroll way back in 1996 in a civil case. He doesn't have a criminal record, but we can now officially say he's a sex pest.
That's right. The former president was ordered to pay her $5 million in damages after the jury found his comments calling the accusations a hoax and a lie severely harmed her reputation.
After the verdict, Trump took to his social media platform Truth Social to deny he'd even met the woman.
I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. The verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time.
Well, for more on this is a spokesperson for Republicans overseas, Jennifer Ewing. Good morning, Jennifer.
Hi, Bev. How are you?
Very well. Nice to see you. First of all, just your reaction to this verdict, please.
Well, I think it's genius political strategy on the part of the Democrats. Today, we're going to hear from the House Oversight Committee, who's going to release their findings with regards to Biden and some of the banking issues with his family. So what better way to distract from that than to, release another Trump scandal?
But this is a court case. It's nothing to do with the Democrats, is it, Jennifer?
Well, I mean, I guess then you're looking at, is this justice or is it politics? And if you look back a month ago to same jurisdiction, New York, where we had the indictment there with a very, very, very weak case, it's just interesting timing, I think.
We were discussing just before the show, actually, Jennifer, about Ron DeSantis and where he has gone in the race for the Republican nomination. He seems to have gone quite quiet. Does that work in Trump's favour?
Look, we're, a year and a half, 18 months out? So many things can change between now and then. If you look at 2008 at this time, I think Giuliani was the favoured for the GOP candidate. In 2000, I think it was McCain. So things change all the time. I do think Ron DeSantis is still very much a formidable player. I think that's probably what a lot of the Democrats fear, is that the GOP will choose him as their candidate, and they'd much prefer to run against Trump. So the idea is stir up the Trump base with a lot of these accusations and, yes, convictions in this case for sure. And let's not, none of this is good for Trump. No man or woman or anyone for that matter wants to have sexual assault next to their name running through the news media. So
could it finish him off, Jennifer, finally?
I don't believe it'll finish him off. However, what it could do is, look, the Democrats are going to vote for Biden or whoever that candidate is. And most hardcore Republicans will vote for whoever the Republican GOP candidate is. What we're really in the battle for is the moderate candidates. And that's where this could damage him a bit. People who think, gosh, this is just too much. And I don't want anyone with this much baggage. Let's not forget in 2020, quite a few Republicans did end up plugging their nose, voting for Biden, thinking he was a centrist. Of course, he turned out to be not a centrist. If you look at a lot of his policies, we have a crisis at the border, fentanyl crisis. We have 40-year high inflation. So I think the moderates who thought they were getting a moderate in Biden were wrong. But are they going to vote for Trump with a lot of this baggage? I don't know.
What would you vote?
I will vote for whoever the GOP candidate is, for sure. In a general election, I will.
But who would you choose as the candidate?
For who the GOP candidate is, I would prefer to see someone else. I would prefer to see DeSantis. He's younger. He can run 2 terms. And I think, as I just discussed with the moderates, he probably plays better with them. And that's what's at stake here.
How would it go down, Jennifer, with the Republicans if Ron DeSantis uses this to his advantage publicly? Because he's tread a very careful line, hasn't he, in terms of what he says about Trump, knowing that he has to win over Trump's base rather than alienating them by criticising. Some of them see Donald Trump as a god. He has to tread a very fine line. Do you expect him to come out and use this at some point?
I don't think that would be very smart if he did. We're already seeing criticism of him for not coming out and calling this a witch hunt or a political, situation. So people are already within less than 12 hours criticizing him for not coming out to defend Trump. I don't see the upside in his using this against Trump. There's too many people that will think, wait a minute, this guy is, sounding like a uniparty, this Democrat. So there's,
I think we're losing you, Jennifer. Thank you. Jennifer Ewing there, spokesperson for Republicans overseas. Thank you very much for joining us. He's fascinating, isn't it?
Well, you can't write him off. You can't write him off. He's now officially, he can be called a sex pest, a sex predator, but there's no criminal record. But interestingly, she got more money for defamation, $3 million, than $2 million for the sexual assault, because he called her a liar. So that's more important.
And so she's not my type.
Yeah. He's not anyone's type.
Where's Melania in all this?
Yeah.
I'd quite like to hear Melania say something about this. She's always very quiet in the background.
She certainly is.
Now, the Home Secretary has warned the House of Lords not to defy the will of the British people as peers debate the illegal migration bill for the first time today.
Yeah, so we're going to get the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's attacked the Stop the Boats policy. He's going to speak in the Lords today, unusually for him, to condemn the morality of the bill. It follows the arrival of a barge set to house hundreds of asylum seekers down in the West Country.
So let's discuss this with our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, as well as political commentator Piers Pottinger. Good morning, gentlemen.
Piers, Archbishop Welby does my head in.
Well, as you know, I'm not very keen on him either. I will say he's Welby in my bonnet. And again, I mean, he doesn't pick his issues well, because I think the majority of voters in this country want something done about the illegal immigration. And from Rishi's point of view, this is one of the big planks of his recovery.
Yeah.
And, of course, what's going to happen in the Lords when they start trying to water it down, if they can dismantle this and stop him getting this through, it's going to be a big blow to him.
Yeah.
Because he's got to start delivering something in an increasingly short space of time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they lost Dover last week in the local elections. Dover has been overwhelmed with migrants. Interestingly, Piers, the Archbishop's opposite number in Rwanda, a former refugee, completely supports the policy of Britain taking migrants to be processed in Rwanda.
Yes, well, I mean, Welby has chosen to pick this issue and discuss the morality of it. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to send people to places they don't want to go necessarily. But when they're illegal immigrants coming here really in a devious way, when they could come, if they were straightforward immigrants, it would be cheaper for them to get a flight from Albania, let's say, to London, than to pay thousands of pounds to some people trafficker to come over in a dinghy. The situation is that I believe this bill must go through, and it can always get changed in the future, but we need firm action now, and that's what I believe the country wants to see.
It just makes my blood sort of boil when you hear Welby saying that this is a moral issue, and for somebody like him to cast a moral judgment on sitting MPs and lords, it's a very powerful statement to make.
Well, he's lost the plot. I mean, he's said that the Church of England is going to give £100 million for reparation for colonialisation and slavery that the Church was involved in the past. Look, we can't do anything about the past, but we can do what's going on now. That £100 million could be used for people suffering today in poverty, who are facing real hardship. Why doesn't he use that money, which I didn't even know the church had because it's doing so badly these days? Why doesn't he use that money to do something positive for his parishioners, his congregation? Why doesn't he do that now?
And in a sense, isn't this a fight that Rishi Sunak will relish with the unelected House of Lords, the Eton-educated Archbishop of Canterbury preaching about morality? What's moral about people crossing the channel in dinghies, often dying at sea?
Yeah.
What's moral about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think, as I say, once again, Welby has picked the wrong issue. I think he's going to face a strong backlash, and I hope his members of the Church of England tell him straightforwardly what they think.
Not that there's many of the Church.
Even if he said it's immoral to not stop the crossings, like that's immoral to allow people to make that treacherous journey.
Yes.
It's immoral to change communities. Tom, we'll bring you in. I was watching some footage yesterday. I mean, there are now, it is even making it onto other channels, would you believe, the impact that these large groups of people, I mean, we've seen footage there of one of the barges. There's only going to be 500 people on that barge. All of these attempts to buy hotels, to buy barges, it looks like they've given up. It looks like the government are just not only ignoring borders, but ignoring communities, Tom.
It is fascinating that wherever the government tries to put a barge or create a facility for these people, inevitably the local MP, often the Conservative local MP, will oppose that. And we've seen that down in Dorset with Richard Drax, the Conservative MP.
Well, he's coming in this morning to say just that.
Who is saying he's looking at every angle, including legal options, to stop this barge being positioned there off the coast of his constituency. Similarly, we saw the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, oppose a facility being constructed in his constituency. There's a very interesting attitude, really, in terms of what looks like there's a broad consensus in terms of what to do within the Conservative Party nationally. But when it comes to locally dealing with specific issues in the medium term, there is very much not a consensus at all.
It's NIMBYism, isn't it, Piers?
Yes.
It's NIMBYism. We want them out of hotels. We'd want to stop paying all this public money to put them in hotels, but we don't want them in our constituency.
But doing nothing is not an option.
No.
We have to do something. And it may not be ideal to start with, but let's start stopping the flood of illegal immigration. Because once we stop it, or at least stall it, we can then adjust it at a later date. This isn't something that needs to be permanent forever. This is something that is needed to stop an immediate problem.
It's a game changer, isn't it, Tom, if they get it right?
There's a big question mark over how they can get it right, because, of course, what the House of Lords is doing today is looking at this stuff for the first time. The bill passed the House of Commons, and now it goes across to the Lords, which, of course, is known as a revising chamber, and it will take on its mantle to revise. And, of course, the Conservative Party does not have a majority in the House of Lords. There's a majority of crossbenchers and Labour Party peers and lots of Lib Dems that were created in the last 20 years. And all of these people will have their own avenues to change things. One of the big avenues that will be likely to pass the House of Lords is changes with regard to child refugees and detention of child refugees. And that could create a situation of parliamentary ping-pong, where the bill gets amended in the Lords, passed back to the Commons, unamended, passed back to the Lords, and it could go on and on. Ultimately, the Conservative Party and the government could sort of ride it through by putting this bill in the next King's Speech and what's known as Parliament acting, the speech whereby the Lords couldn't amend it anymore. But that would, of course, delay things by another year.
They've got to get on with it.
Well, we're going to keep you both here. Anyway, you know what you could say? It's immoral to not be fast-tracking the applications. Anyway,
Look,
we will keep you informed.
And we will, of course, when Archbishop Welby speaks, we will be covering that here on GB News later in the day.
OK.
It won't be a very interesting speech.
But I don't think we're bringing... Are we bringing the speech live? I don't...
Well, we'll probably get a clip of it. Now, we're going to switch gears because there's another phone hacking trial involving the Duke of Sussex, of course.
Prince Harry's suing Mirror Group newspapers this time over what he's calling unlawful information gathering. Our national reporter Paul Hawkins is at the High Court for us now. Good morning, Paul. What's the latest on this particular occasion that Harry is back in court?
Yeah, but the difference with this is that, Bev, this is an actual trial. This is where he's going to get his day in court, although this is a trial that's going to last 6 to 7 weeks, and he won't make an appearance here in court until June. When he does, though, he'll become the first senior royal to give evidence in a courtroom since the 19th century. But today is day one. We're going to hear statements from both sides. This is a joint claim by Prince Harry and a group of celebrities, including the likes of Cheryl Cole and the former footballer turned celebrity Ian Wright. Also lawyers for the estate of the late, great George Michael. So all together, along with Prince Harry, they're bringing this lawsuit against the Mirror Group newspaper that owns the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People. Allegations of obtaining information illegally in order to write stories about them from the mid-90s up to 2011. Now, what we're going to hear over the next 6 to 7 weeks is evidence from whistleblowers, documentation, emails, phone records, receipts from private investigators, which they say builds a case that shows that Mirror Group newspaper, they say, was hacking their phones in the 90s and the early 2000s. Mirror Group, in the past, they have made limited admissions that there was phone hacking happening at the Daily Mirror, and they've paid hundreds of thousands of pounds out in compensation because of that. But that is a limited admission of liability. In relation to this trial, they deny all allegations of phone hacking, and indeed in some of the claimants' cases they're saying that it's too late to come to trial, and they're trying to have them, some of those claimants' cases thrown out of court. But we are going to hear a lot of evidence about how the Mirror Group newspaper operates, lots of allegations over the next few weeks, and we're going to hear the name Piers Morgan mentioned a lot because, of course, he was editor of the Daily Mirror from 1995 to 2004.
So, Paul, just to be clear, did you say 7 weeks you expect the trial to go on? And do we think Harry will make an appearance in court?
Yeah, he's expected to appear in June. So most of these most of what you've been hearing when we talk about Prince Harry taking on the likes of Associated Newspapers who own the Daily Mail, News Group newspapers who own the Sun, those have been pre-trial hearings to then go to trial. This is an actual trial itself, so he is going to get his day in court, and we're expecting him to appear in June, and that will be box office. It will be a significant moment because he'll become the first senior royal to appear in a courtroom giving evidence since the 19th century. So that will certainly be a moment to remember in this trial, but it is going to last for 6 to 7 weeks. We're going to hear a lot of stuff about Mirrorgate, about the Mirror Group, I should say, a lot of allegations about how they operate their newspapers, and there will undoubtedly be some information that comes out about the royal household and about how they run their operations there. So potentially damaging for both sides.
All right, that's Paul Hawkins at the High Court for us there. Thanks for joining us. We're still in the studio with us, Piers Pottinger, of course, and Tom Harwood. We were talking earlier, Keir Starmer, big interviews yesterday, flatly ruled out the idea of a coalition with the SNP, but refused to rule out a coalition with the Lib Dems.
Yes, I think he's being quite canny about that because obviously they want to win an overall majority. But if you look at what happened in the local elections, they would still be some way short of that. And of course, the Labour Party have a record of leading the Lib Dems up the garden path. Tony Blair did it.
He did.
Paddy Ashdown nearly brought, and when he was worried about not getting an overall majority.
Yeah.
But it is very, very dangerous. I mean, the Lib Dems are absolutely appalling in any kind of coalition, as we saw the dreadful Nick Clegg.
Yes.
And we've also seen people like Ed Davey, where, don't forget, he was the Minister for the Post Office, and ultimately responsible for the biggest miscarriage of British justice in history, causing such horrible tragedy for so many sub-postmasters. But, I mean, the thing is, if they have this coalition, which I suspect it's quite possible they will, then we're going to get proportional representation, and that is the end
of the
for the Conservatives for the foreseeable future.
And they could,
proportional representation is really dangerous.
And, of course, the Lib Dems may then reopen the whole Brexit issue.
I'm sure they'll try to, because that's the sort of idiotic thing they would do.
Yeah, he wants to go back there. What do you think, Tom?
I think this is a clever play by Keir Starmer because it means that we're talking about the Lib Dems, which is a party that clearly riles Conservative-minded voters, but in the southeast of England, in the constituencies that have become to be known as the Blue Wall, they're much more palatable to a series of voters there. And it means that across conversations like this, we're no longer talking about Keir Starmer being propped up by the SNP. We're talking about Keir Starmer being propped up by Sir Ed Davey, which seems like a far less scary prospect to a lot of Middle England. So it's a clever play because we're now talking about something that seems less scary in the situation of a hung parliament, whereas the Conservative Party will be wanting to talk about the prospect of an SNP-Labour deal, which, of course, Keir Starmer has said that he doesn't want to do, but he may well have no choice, and therefore everything's up in the air.
He'd do with whatever he could, wouldn't he?
Well, yes. I mean, the one thing he wants is power, and they will do whatever they can to achieve that.
How does, as Tom says, this is quite an attractive proposition to maybe some wavering voters who see themselves as rather centrist and might traditionally have been Conservative but no longer have an appetite for that. How does Rishi Sunak counter this?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, the Lib Dems, I've been saying for a while now, they're the real danger in the next election, and I think they could get a really large number of seats. Because it is a more palatable choice, as Tom said, to some Middle England voters. And if they play the union card as well, which is what Starmer is now doing, because he knows he's going to actually do very well in Scotland unless the SNP, by some extraordinary miracle, recover from the quagmire they're deep in at the moment. And Starmer is playing this, I think, very cleverly, as Tom said.
And there's a real risk for the Conservative Party that they start to look out of touch. If they start talking about issues like first past the post or proportional representation, most voters' eyes will glaze over and ears will shut. The Conservatives need to find things that actually resonate with the country at large. And anything that steers them away from the Prime Minister's 5 priorities that he goes on and on about is a way to steer them away from
and then bang on about House of Lords reform.
Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, as always. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump a little bit more after this. It's Britain's News Channel.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon with the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Some sunny spells, especially in the east this morning, but it's going to turn increasingly cloudy from the west, with heavy showers starting once again. Now, those showers are already with us in the west because we've got low pressure feeding an occluded front in. Further east, yesterday's heavy downpours have cleared, but we've got more on the way for the rest of today. So cloudier conditions in the west, slowly making their way eastwards, and then showers just about possible anywhere into the afternoon, but particularly inland, particularly for central and eastern parts of England into central Scotland. These showers, where they do occur, will be very lively again. Some thunder, some hail in places, and they'll be slow moving. Not everyone will catch a shower. In between the showers, especially around coast, there'll be some sunshine and temperatures will reach the mid to high teens. Drier towards the far north of Scotland, but here there's a lot of low cloud and mist, and that's certainly affecting eastern and northern Scotland during Wednesday night. Elsewhere, some clear spells, but further showery rain will affect Northern Ireland, western Scotland, western parts of England and Wales. Some more persistent rain possible in some spots across Northern Ireland. Temperatures again dipping to around the mid to high single figures, 10 or 11 in 1 or 2 spots. But a generally cloudy start to Thursday, particularly towards the west. The cloud and the showery rain will once again move east through the day, and by the afternoon it's a mix of sunny spells and showers. Once again, the showers will be hit and miss. They're not going to affect everyone, and especially around coast there will be some sunshine in between. Temperatures reaching 17, perhaps 18 Celsius, so a slight cooling trend later this week before those temperatures rise again into the weekend, because from Friday, especially in the north, and into Saturday across the whole of the UK, drier and sunnier weather is on the way, and as a result, temperatures will rise.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of May. This is The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
The former President Donald Trump, well, he's now Sexually, he's been told he's sexually assaulted a writer, a jury found in a civil case. He says he's never even met the woman. He calls it a witch hunt. But is this now the end of his attempt to go back to the White House?
It's the will of the people. Suella Braverman tells the House of Lords not to block her illegal migration bill, but widespread opposition is expected, including from the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Don't you love him? Harry's back. Well, he's not back, but the hacking case is back. This time, the Prince is taking action against Mirror newspapers. Will be live at the court.
And Labour under pressure over a coalition of chaos as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to rule out a deal with the Lib Dems. Get involved with the conversation this morning. Let us know your thoughts. gbnews@gbnews.uk is the email address. But first of all, here is your news with Bethany.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 10:01. A US jury has found former President Donald Trump sexually abused a magazine writer in the 1990s and then defamed her by branding her a liar. He's been ordered to pay nearly £4 million in damages to the columnist E. Jean Carroll. Mr. Trump will not face a prison sentence as the trial was a civil case. Following the verdict, Miss Carroll said it was a victory for every woman who suffered because she was not believed. Mr. Trump has called the verdict a disgrace and says he will appeal.
I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. The verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time.
Well, this is just one of several charges that Donald Trump is facing, including an investigation into the Capitol Hill insurrection and election interference in Georgia. US discrimination attorney Gloria Allred says he's garnering support by peddling lies.
He's actually exploiting the fact that he is being investigated, that he is being indicted. He is raising money, millions of dollars, calling himself a victim, it's a witch hunt, and all of the other phrases that he uses time and again. His fundraising off of poor people who believe in him is being investigated also by the special counsel.
Doctors and nurses will soon be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and a third of nurses could be trained via the apprenticeship route in the coming years. The head of the NHS says this gives an opportunity for school leavers to earn while they learn. The expansion of apprenticeships is also said to offer an alternative to the traditional university degree. The UK is set to make Russia's mercenary Wagner Group a proscribed terrorist organisation. That's according to the Times newspaper, which says the move is likely to happen within weeks. The Wagner Group has been fighting alongside Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. The decision would mean it'll be a criminal offence to join and support the group, and it will also apply to displaying its logo in public or attending its meetings. Similar proscribed groups include the Islamic State and neo-Nazi group National Action. In Pakistan, almost 1,000 supporters of the former Prime Minister Imran Khan have been arrested since clashes with police began yesterday. Imran Khan was arrested by anti-corruption police, and local media there are now reporting his former Secretary-General has also been taken into custody. Over 130 police officials have been injured, 25 police vehicles have been set on fire, and dozens of government buildings have been looted in the Punjab province. Back here, a phone hacking trial involving the Duke of Sussex and the Mirror Group newspapers is set to begin today. Prince Harry will enter the witness box over what he's calling unlawful information gathering. Other celebrities involved include former Girls Aloud singer Cheryl, the estate of George Michael and footballer Ian Wright. But the tabloid is contesting the claims, arguing that some of them have been brought too late. Longer lorries will be allowed on British roads under new government plans to carry more goods with fewer journeys. It'll mean HGVs can be up to 2 metres long with a maximum length of up to 61 feet. The government says drivers will be able to move the same amount of goods but will use 8% fewer journeys. The vehicles could be allowed on roads from the 31st of May. A 23-year-old British man has pleaded guilty to hacking into the Twitter accounts of more than 100 people, including celebrities. Joseph James O'Connor has accessed the accounts of high-profile figures, including Joe Biden, Barack Obama and Elon Musk. He's facing charges which carry a maximum sentence of more than 70 years in prison. The crimes took place in 2020 when he was aged 19. He'll be sentenced in June. The first baby with DNA from 3 people has been born in the UK. The treatment aims to prevent the passing of defective genes from mothers by giving the baby DNA from its mother, father and a female donor. The baby receives most of their DNA from the 2 parents, with just 0.1% from a donor. The fertility regulator HFEA says less than 5 babies have been born using the technique. Parts of England have been hit by hailstorms, thunder and flash flooding. Villagers in Somerset have been overcome by extreme rushing water. The Met Office is warning heavy showers will continue over the next 2 days, with some areas seeing over 4 centimetres of rain in a 3-hour period. Thunderstorm alerts are in place for southern England, East Anglia and parts of the Midlands. You're up to date on GB News now. It's back to Andrew and Bev.
I think
it's a big story, isn't it?
A tiny bit more.
Donald Trump sexually abused magazine writer E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s, but didn't find the allegation she made that he raped her.
That's right. And yet he has had to pay her $5 million in damages. Because the jury concluded that calling the accusations a hoax and a lie severely harmed her reputation. But if they've concluded that he's not guilty of what she accused him of, doesn't that make her a liar?
Extraordinary.
Well,
joining us for more analysis is the chairman of Republican Overseas UK. You know him, Greg Swenson, who's with us now. Greg, it is an extraordinary thing, isn't it? She accused him of rape. The jury didn't agree with that. They decided he'd sexually assaulted her, but they paid her more damages for defamation than for the sexual assault. It's a real hodgepodge.
Yeah, it's confusing, and I think that nobody's really going to be able to know, who's telling the truth here, who's telling the whole truth. And I think this looks, again, like, more weaponization of the justice system. I'm not suggesting that she's lying. I mean, I don't know that, but this is just one of many cases that have been filed going back 7 or 8 years now. Another case that occurred 17 years ago. And then she was really pushed by a handful of real Trump haters to proceed with this. And, good for her, she won if she's telling the truth. But I'm just not sure. And it looks like another case of another political assault on the former president.
Who would these Trump haters be, Greg?
Well, it was surely Kellyanne Conway's husband, George Conway, kind of led the charge here, and it was financed by the founder, Reid Hoffman. He financed the case. He's the founder of LinkedIn, another real Trump hater. And so, again, it doesn't mean he's telling the truth or not telling the truth, but it's pretty clear that, there's been a 7-year effort, 8-year effort at getting Trump. And again, without knowing whether it has merit or not, clearly the Alvin Bragg indictment did not have legal merit to it, but they proceeded anyway. But it looks like the Democrats and the media really want to help Trump win the nomination, because this case will actually boost his numbers. And that's clearly the raid on Mar-a-Lago, as well as the Alvin Bragg indictment, really helped his cause, and you could see it in the poll numbers. I'm not saying they're not suggesting that will last right through the primaries, but it's definitely a campaign on the left to make President Trump the nominee.
Just to be clear, so Kellyanne Conway, Greg, you say she was partly behind this. She's the woman who used that phrase, there are alternative facts, because she used to work for President Trump.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bev. No, I meant her husband, or actually now ex-husband, was very much a Trump opponent. It's kind of a funny marriage. So it wasn't Kellyanne Conway that's behind it. It's George Conway, who's really behind and really pressured the plaintiff to file. And so This could backfire on the Democrats. Right now, they want Trump to be the nominee because they think he's the easiest to beat and perhaps the only one that Biden could beat in the general election. But that could backfire on them in many ways. One is he could possibly win, which would really be a massive backfire on the left. But also, it doesn't mean he'll win the nomination. Someone else could win the nomination. It's still way early. Could be Ron DeSantis, could be Glenn Youngkin, could be Nikki Haley, and any of those people would beat Biden in the general election. So this could really, it's really a gamble on the Democrats and the media.
It's a big week for the immigration story here in the UK this week, Greg. But it's arguably even bigger in the US. Title 42 expires tomorrow. Just explain to people what this means. I can't believe there's not more of the British global media really talking about this. It's huge.
It's really enormous. And the first travesty is that the so-called COVID emergency is only officially ending tomorrow. That's the first absurd point to make here, that, until tomorrow, a UK citizen without a vaccination could not enter the United States. And it just proves the insanity.
Oh, we lost Greg. Just to be clear, what Title 42 is, this was a restriction placed by Trump during the pandemic to say that people couldn't travel because with the Centre of Diseases Control was involved in this decision. That expires tomorrow, and there are currently thousands, hundreds and thousands of people gathering at the border.
Oh, Mexico.
The Mexican border with America, to take advantage of this expiration of this particular clause. We will only really see tomorrow on what's going to happen there. But honestly, watch this space. It's going to be huge because Biden is doing nothing about it. And Biden is somehow using it to allow hundreds of thousands of people.
And his Vice President, Kamala Harris, who's useless, we all know that, she's in charge of this policy and she's done nothing either. So if we think we've got problems with stopping the boats, this is going to be huge. Because there's talk that there are going to be refugees in Central Park in New York.
Tented communities. But in the same way that we are here accommodating and creating accommodation for people who want to arrive here without the legal paperwork, they are doing the same in America, but on a vast scale.
Absolutely.
Right, moving on. Doctors and nurses will be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and a third of nurses may be trained in apprenticeships in the coming years.
Is this the right thing to do? And will this route be enough to train doctors to a good level? For more analysis, we're going to speak to the GP at Same Day Doctor, Dr. Lawrence Girdis. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, this has come out of nowhere, Doctor. It's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. School leavers will be able to start working as doctors without going to university under plans to fix the NHS staffing crisis. Do you support that?
Actually, in a sense, I do, although I suspect the Royal Colleges will quash this initiative. When I was a medical student, I spent 3 years in a laboratory and library and lecture hall before even going into a hospital. And similarly, nurses who used to train on wards were forced to do a 3-year degree course. And I think both of those are unfortunate. We were desperate to get into hospitals. And if it is a pair of hands, as well, they've got to do their training as well. They're pass the exams. I actually think it's a good idea, but many people will see it as a downgrading of medical training, and that's why I think the rest of the medical profession may not be happy with this. But I think in principle it's good, and I think there are pairs of hands out there that can help with the demands on the NHS.
And I was never quite sure, Doctor, why it was changed so that nurses had to get degrees before they could start as nurses. This would reverse that policy.
I think it's a bit of the Royal College of Nursing. It's a bit like the Royal College of General Practitioners, which didn't exist when I first qualified. And then they insisted that everyone who is a GP must do 3 years training after qualifying. It takes 10 years, 10 years to train a GP, which, I think is perhaps a little bit unreasonable given the shortages we've got. And I think the same thing happened with nurses. It's a way of, they felt, of improving the status of the profession to make them have a degree and then bring them onto the wards. And a lot of student nurses felt they were being used as unpaid, unskilled labour, which may have been the case. But that has been the move over the last 10 or 15 years. to take people out of the hospital, and I think now we need them back in.
So do we know quite how this will work? Will it be that it's the normal route post A-levels? They will do, as you say, exams. They'll have to sit in lectures, but that's alongside working in hospitals.
Well, I'm hoping that's the case. What I don't want to see is a second-class medical degree. We've got problems at the moment. There are physician associates who are unqualified doctors, but there's quite a lot of argy-bargy that goes on between doctors and PAs at the moment. So the last thing I think we want is a sort of hierarchy of doctors. No, I'm hoping that the 5-year medical degree will be an integrated one with hospitals, lectures, laboratories, and I actually think the doctors will come out of that in a very well-rounded way.
Sounds great.
You talked about the Royal Colleges. Can they block this, Doctor, or can the government say, we're doing it?
Oh, they're very powerful. It'll be the Royal Colleges, it'll be the BMA, it'll be the RCN, it'll be all of them. They will. My guess is they'll fight tooth and nail against this.
OK, all right, thank you so much, Dr Lawrence Gurlis there.
It's a very sensible idea.
Well, it comes off the back of our discussion yesterday about pharmacists being able to prescribe.
Very sensible.
That seemed like a sensible idea as well.
Yeah, and it's on the front page of the Telegraph. It came from nowhere. We didn't see this coming. I was talking to Steve Bartlett, the Health Secretary, about a week ago, and he said, we've got some really interesting stuff coming up. Here it is.
And you know what I think part of the problem has been with quite a lot of medical people recently? So this is a bit controversial. One of the most important skills for a medic are people skills.
Yeah.
Being able to communicate with your patient, warmth, compassion, eye contact. And when we've had a medical system which has only ever taken off the cream of the crop who've got 10 A stars at GCSE, 5 A's at A-level, they aren't always the most personable or socially relaxed.
And they train for 10 years and they move to Australia.
That's right.
How's that?
So I think this sounds wonderful. Trying for another one. Honestly, wait for one good idea and then 2 come along at once. Exactly. Now, another phone hacking trial involving the Duke of Sussex begins today.
Prince Harry is suing Mirror Group newspapers over what he called unlawful information gathering. For more on this, we can speak to the media lawyer, Jonathan Code. Jonathan, morning. This is actually a full trial, and we will see Prince Harry in court, in the witness box, which is unprecedented in modern times.
It is in modern times. The last time a senior royal gave evidence at a trial was back in the 18th century, apparently. But it is, and we kind of run out of moments where we say this is extraordinarily unprecedented. I mean, the whole thing is beyond incomprehensible, given the attitude of the royal family, which is really never to take action to protect themselves in the courts for years and years and years.
The Mirror is saying part of their defence is that a lot of these allegations are out of time. In other words, they happened, perhaps 25, 30 years ago, so the statute of limitation comes into effect. Is that an argument that will be effective for them?
Well, this is a quite difficult issue for the judge to decide. So the basic principle is this. To bring a phone hacking claim, you have to bring it in within 6 years of the action that you say is the wrongful action. However, the Limitation Act gives an exception where, firstly, the activity has been concealed, which obviously it has in the case of phone hacking. And secondly, where the prospective claimant either didn't know that the phone hacking in this case took place or could not have, with reasonable diligence, discovered that the phone hacking had taken place. So the issue before the judge is, first of all, did Prince Harry, to take him as an example, did he know that phone hacking took place less than 6 years ago? And if he didn't know, should he, with reasonable diligence, or his legal team with reasonable diligence, have discovered it? So in this situation, the newspaper is in the absurd position of saying, we denied it, we denied it, we denied it. But, of course, no one should have believed us when we denied it. So it's the peculiar position to take.
Isn't it? So Harry will probably argue, well, I couldn't take action because of my position within the royal family.
But I think in his book, Jonathan, Spare, he talks about he was aware of phone hacking in 2010. Well, that's 13 years ago. Why didn't he do something about it then?
Well, look, these are exactly the arguments which are being played out, and they were played out very much they've been played out before in other claims that he's bringing, and more recently against News International, the Sun titles. And of course, the other factor is that for a long time he was in Afghanistan, so he can't be expected to sort of follow the news in those circumstances. But it's one thing to know that generally phone hacking took place, which we learned when Mr. Goodman was sent to jail. It's another thing to know that this particular newspaper actually hacked his phone. So it's got to be a bit more granular than that.
OK, thank you so much, Jonathan. Jonathan Coe, their media lawyer. We were both hacked.
We were.
We were both hacked.
We were.
I could have got a new conservatory out of that.
Yeah,
Some of my mates who were hacked did.
I was working for The Times and I was being hacked by a sister paper.
I was just on the telly a bit and I got hacked by the News of the World. And we had a ridiculous encounter. I had to go to the police station and they showed me some notes and said, do you want to press charges? And I said, no, I'm not traumatised.
No, I didn't want anything
Slightly
to do
regret that now.
Now, don't forget, we're going to be talking about the arrival of barges to house hundreds of asylum seekers who've entered the UK. We're going to be speaking to one Tory MP who doesn't really want them in his patch.
No, it's going to be interesting, that. This is the point.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. You are watching To The Point on GB News. It is 10:24.
The Home Secretary's warned the House of Lords not to defy the will of the British people. They're debating the illegal migration bill for the first time today. The Archbishop of Canterbury is going to wade in. Of course he is. Justin Welby.
He's expected to condemn the morality of the bill. It also follows the arrival of a barge set to house hundreds of asylum seekers who've entered the UK. Well, joining in the studio for more is MP for South Dorset, Richard Drax.
The barge is in your constituency. It's going to Portland, and you don't want it.
No.
It's in Falmouth now.
Right.
It's designed for 222.
Yeah.
It's going to have 506.
Yeah.
That's problem number one.
Yeah.
And even if the rooms are doubled, that leaves about 60 without a room. So they're going to have rooms of 3 or 4 on a barge in a highly, highly restricted port with access from and back and forth on a bus.
They can get on and off.
On a bus.
Right.
They can't wander through the port, so they're going to simply be stuck on what I call it a quasi-prison,
right?
Because you won't get everybody off at the same time. And I think the frustrations and the issues and the problems that some of them will have will bubble up. And I'm very concerned about what's going to happen on the barge in the port. I'm also concerned with hundreds of migrants of whom we know nothing. And the minister yesterday could not confirm whether they were free of criminal offences, whatever. And they're wandering around a very sensitive seaside resort at the height of summer.
But we can't keep these people in hotels at this huge public expense, Richard. So they've got to go somewhere. This is classic NIMBYism, isn't it? We want them out of hotels, but not in my constituency.
Yes, that's been a point made to me many times, and I can very clearly disagree with you in the sense that this is, as I say, a highly restricted former Royal Naval port. It's not a centre, for example, in the middle of the countryside or near a big area of a big conurbation where the resources can be more easily targeted. This is stuck away in a port that no one can get to. You've got to go through security to get there and on a bus to get to the actual barge. There's no room for them other than on the barge to do anything. They're going to be given £9 a week to go into my constituency and to do what? I mean, this is a lot of 25 to 30-year-olds who will have
probably
nothing
economic
to do.
migrants anyway.
Most of them will be economic migrants wandering around in a very sensitive seaside resort at the height of summer.
How much warning did you get that this boat was arriving in your port?
The first I heard was about a week before it was announced, and the Home Secretary rang me. I then saw the Minister in the division lobby that same day and told them both what I thought in a very blunt way, courteous, of course.
Of course.
I then heard nothing more, and I've heard nothing more from them. I get all my news from organisations like you and the press, and, of course, my counsel, with whom I'm working very closely. And what's happened is that all the negotiations have happened behind our back with a private port. The port have done this for commercial reasons. And now, having decided to put them there, they're now asking us, well, if we do this, can you help? It's the wrong way around.
Who gets paid then? You say they're doing it for commercial reasons. What, the port is being paid to take these refugees?
Yes, it is.
How much are they being paid?
We don't know.
What?
But it's apparently a private figure negotiated in private, so we won't...
The taxpayer is paying.
Public money.
And that's like if you moor a boat in a harbour, you have to pay to have it there. Do we know how long the boat is going to be there? Have they given you...
Well, initially 18 months, but I fear because the problem in this country is so big, I suspect barges will increase and that barge will stay there for a lot longer.
How did that conversation go? When Suella Braverman rang you and she said, Richard, are you sitting down? How does that conversation go? Does she tell you this is a fait accompli, or is she asking your permission?
I think fait accompli would be... She did say, we haven't quite decided yet, but I'm afraid when the news broke a few days later that it had been decided, and I didn't quite agree with that approach. No, I was not consulted or asked. None of us were. That's the point I've been making. We just have no preparation or comment as to our concerns, and all the statutory authorities agree with me, and this is the wrong place for this particular
Why did they choose your port?
Well, if you look on the website, it says for jobs and investment. And in my speech in the House of Commons recently, I said what jobs and what investment. I don't see...
Jobs on the boat, presumably.
Well, there's a security company who look after these young men, yes. So there's a few jobs there being paid for the taxpayer.
Millions of pounds.
There's going to be a nurse, as I understand it, at the end of the barge on the quay, living in a hut or something, I'm not quite sure about that, who's going to look after their medical concerns to prevent them going off and into the few GBs that we have. I don't see that working very well either. And there's some very serious health issues, and the head of our ICB, who's has some experience with migrants, so many have serious mental health issues.
And TB is a big problem.
Infections, if that infection sweeps through a boat like that, Dorset County will not be able to cope with 506 young men.
And it's a very important tourist spot too, where you are. Do you think this is going to hit the tourist trade?
Yes, I think inevitably it's going to. It's a family seaside resort, which relies entirely for most of its revenue in the summer months. To have 500 young men, if they are all out at the same time, in Weymouth, I can see problems occurring.
What's the best case scenario, Richard? What's the best case? Let's just try to use our imagination for a moment that this works well. What does that look like for your community?
I don't think it will work well. I mean, the only way we can deal with this is secure reception centres, and I've told the government repeatedly they must start building them fast, because this problem is not going to go away.
But not in your constituency.
Well, if it happens to be, if there's an appropriate place, but I would have thought these centres should be near major conurbations where resources can be easily sent to these reception centres, and the people inside them looked after properly.
Just ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Politically, disastrous local election results for the Conservatives last week. You didn't have any elections in your patch.
No.
How much trouble is the Conservative Party in? The government?
I think the Conservative Party must start acting like Conservatives. That would be a start.
Well, we've said that on this.
Yes. That would be a start. I mean, I'm concerned at the direction of travel. Rishi Sunak, he's a good man. And he works very hard and is doing a lot of good things, and I support him. But we need to hear a much more conservative language, low taxes, law and order.
Growth.
I mean, this latest episode with the demonstrators being arrested, and I'm staggered at the coverage it's got.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of thousands of people who enjoyed that parade, and there were no incidents. Now, I wasn't on the ground, I'm not a police officer, and it's very hard to judge, but I'm assuming that they thought was a risk and did their job and prevented rape alarms being chucked into horses, which could have stampeded, and all the rest of it. As it happened, the parade went off faultlessly and everyone came home safe. I'd have thought that's a big tick. Well done, the police.
Right. So more conservative policies from the government?
We need much more, the narrative needs to change, and we need to hear a lot more true blue policies, yes we do.
Can I just ask you one more question about your area and this particular issue with the immigration? Whoever stands against you in the election, are you intending to stand again in your constituency?
I've been re-adopted, yes.
Okay.
Quite right too.
Will whoever stands against you, how will they play out this boat being in the harbour? Will they support it, or will they have to come out against it? It raises an interesting political tension, doesn't it?
Well, you must ask whoever that person is that question. I don't pay any attention to the opposition parties, I'm afraid. I just simply tell my constituents what I believe in and where I'm going, and I hope the message is positive.
And they have your backing on this?
I think most people, it would seem to me from the emails and support we're getting, yes, they are.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
That's Richard Drax, MP for South Dorset. Thanks so much for coming in, and come and join us again some other time.
Now, still to come, the first UK baby with DNA from 3 people has been born after a new IVF procedure. We'll get some of your thoughts on that. But first of all, here is your morning's news with Bethany Elsey.
Good morning. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 10:30. A US jury has found former President Donald Trump sexually abused magazine writer E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s and then defamed her by branding her a liar. He's been ordered to pay nearly £4 million in damages to the columnist. Mr. Trump will not face a prison sentence as the trial was a civil case. Well, following the verdict, Ms. Carroll said it was a victory for every woman who suffered because she was not believed. Mr. Trump has called the verdict a disgrace and said he will appeal. Doctors and nurses will soon be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and a third of nurses could be trained via the apprenticeship route in the coming years. The head of the NHS says this gives an opportunity for school leavers to earn while they learn. The expansion of apprenticeships is also said to offer an alternative to a traditional university degree. The UK is set to make Russia's mercenary Wagner Group a prescribed terrorist organisation. That's according to the Times newspaper, which says the move is likely to happen within weeks. The Wagner Group has been fighting alongside Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. The decision would mean it'll be a criminal offence to join and support the group. Similar prescribed groups include the Islamic State and neo-Nazi group National Action. And a charity is warning poor diabetes care could be linked to more than 7,000 excess deaths in England last year. Diabetes UK says the figure is 13% higher than pre-pandemic levels and could be due to the backlog in routine care. The charity has also found less than half of 11,000 people living with the condition have received all the necessary checks over the past 2 years. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2622 and 1.1523 euros. The price of gold is £1,607.40 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,750 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, investments that matter.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:38. This is The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Your views are pouring in, and you are very, very pleased with the government's idea of letting people go straight from A-levels into training to be doctors and nurses. So Caroline says, excellent. The idea of having a huge debt after degree course puts off so many young people entering the profession. I don't see why having a degree lessens the wages of nurses, because it's an essential job. We absolutely need nurses, and many of them. Common sense idea about time.
That's right. And Jackie has said, I trained as what was an SRN. What's that? A specialist registrar nurse, maybe?
State registered nurse.
State registered nurse, thank you. Between 1974 to 77, a 3-year training consisting of study blocks, 6-week placements, Psychiatry, 12 weeks. Maternity, 12 weeks. I had a book that's to be signed off by senior staff to prove I'd successfully taken part, achieved certain procedures. I genuinely don't see the point in a degree. Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, and this, a lot of people also getting in touch about Donald Trump. Mel says Trump has been fined for calling his accuser a liar. She accused him of rape. The jury found Trump did not rape her. Is that not her telling lies?
And good morning to Karen, who says she uses her earphones and listens to us every morning while she's out walking the dog. Thank you for your great coverage. Of course, remember, if you are watching us on the telly and then you leave the house, put your DAB radio on and you can hear us, or the app on your phone. Right, joining us now to go through some of the day's top stories, columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn and the director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Good morning to you both. Right, should we start with this story we haven't covered yet? We said we were going to talk about it. The first UK baby, Patrick, born with DNA from 3 people after a new IVF procedure. Good news?
Yes, it is. I heard it this morning and I was quite sceptical because
Me too.
I tend to be quite socially conservative on kind of Frankenstein science stuff, and I wondered whether this idea of 3 parents and extra DNA going in could be used for sort of designer baby purposes. But in fact, the story, which is on the front of The Guardian in 1 or 2 other places today, is that a technique has happened where a very small percentage of DNA and genetic material known as mitochondrial, which is outside the nucleus mainly of whatever we're talking about, every cell, carries sort of risk of mutation and disease, and babies get all their mitochondria from the mother's side and not the father's side. So just by putting a small amount of a donor woman's DNA into the mix, you don't compromise the inherited characteristics of a child from the 2 parents, but you do protect the babies of many women from developing severe disease as their childhood goes on. So it's a remarkable story. It's great news, and it should spare, you know, perhaps thousands of babies and young children from severe disease. So great.
Would the child have to be told, do you think, Emma, that there was 3, not 2?
Well, you should think so. I mean, if I'm being honest, this gives me the creeps. I think it's playing God. There's, I'm sure, a good reason why all human beings have 2 parents and don't have the DNA of 3 people naturally. I do think this is playing God. I understand where Patrick is coming from, that obviously nobody wants children to be born with diseases, things like, you know, muscular dystrophy and that kind of thing. But I feel like this is editing genes, and whether the intention in this particular case is to limit it just to making sure that children are not born with disabilities, the precedent that sets, it is one of editing genes, it is one of designer babies. Even if it's for the health of the child, it is still a designer baby. And it strikes me as unethical and a bit wrong.
Yeah, where is it happening? Is it happening, I presume?
It's in the UK.
It's in the UK?
Yeah.
Yes, there was, I think, a Freedom of Information answer that there's up to 5 such children have been born. So I'm not sure we know precisely where. But I think it's a bit unfair of Emma and a bit misleading, this idea of 3 parents, because 99.8% of the DNA is from, you know, the father and the main mother. It's only this tiny amount of very protective mitochondrial material that's gone in. So it's not like a third.
Right.
Hello, daddy. Hello, mummy. Hello, other mummy. You know, it's a protective thing. So I don't really agree that every child, you know, should be told they have a second mother.
But what if the third person in this equation wants to have access to the child? They're allowed, aren't they? Because they help create it.
See, this is the HFEA, isn't it? It's the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Association. They normally have very strict rules on these sort of things. Apparently, they've given the green light to 30 cases so far, which will prevent babies being born with otherwise incurable genetic diseases. I'm like you, Patrick. My initial instinct with these things is we have to be incredibly careful if we start to tinker around with human DNA. We have to be very careful as to where it leads. But I think, Emma, if you want to have a child and you know you have a genetic abnormality and you have any possibility of saving that child,
from a life of pain, a shortened life, you would go for
No, I understand that, and I'm obviously not intending to mislead because Patrick had already explained how the mitochondrial DNA is a small part of it. But I do think that this is unprecedented in its ethical complexity. And as a society, we haven't had a conversation about this. There has been no public discussion of this.
That's a very good
It's
point.
hugely ethically complicated. Even just now in this brief conversation, we've raised all sorts of issues surrounding access to the child, whether that person should be defined as a parent. Also, if you bear in mind that the DNA from that third person is responsible for that child's existence, is responsible for that child's health, there are all sorts of ethical considerations around this that, you know, we, having only briefly thought about this and not being ethicists, are not capable of drawing all those things out right now.
Yeah.
But that's something that we should have a public conversation about as a society, not something that we should just be running headlong into because it feels right, because, of course, we sympathise and we do want children to be healthy.
Patrick, with your political hat on, this is going to get raised in Parliament, isn't it?
I would have thought so. I'd have thought
there'll be a number of people who oppose it.
Yeah.
And will want to say, how is this allowed to happen?
Yes, in fact, I'd be, for instance, interested to hear what your fellow presenter Jacob Rees-Mogg's view as a high Catholic might be about it. And the thing about it, I suppose, is that Emma's point that it's kind of come out of a blue sky.
It has.
Having been authorised kind of in secret by a quango.
We're the first country in the world to authorise.
Yeah. I just would assume it must have gone through careful consideration at a ministerial level, but you can't take that for granted.
No, I'd be surprised because I think it would have come out. When politicians are involved, Patrick, it always leaks. And why shouldn't we be told about it?
And I don't think
why
we
should
should.
it only have come out under a freedom of information?
I don't think that we should be naively confident about the ethical qualifications of ministers. You know, we shouldn't be... We've seen, even from recent experience, that ethical considerations often don't get enough attention in Parliament or in politics. You know, ethicists have solid educations to allow them to weigh these matters up. And frankly, I don't think that it's possible that this could have received the attention that it deserves, given how hugely complex it is. And I actually think that this story should be much more controversial than it is, than it seems to be.
I think it might gather momentum, actually.
And particularly when there are pharmaceutical companies in the background who are set to make money out of these sorts of procedures, then we have to tread incredibly carefully and have all of our wits about us.
It does seem extraordinary. This is unprecedented. We're the only country in the world where it's happened, and we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, just my instinct is, and I agree, I'm not a qualified ethicist, but it sounds to me like the potential for good and for the sparing of misery and premature death enormously outweighs the potential downsides. And personally, I don't regard someone who's contributed 0.2% of the DNA, not including the main inheritable traits, as a parent.
But maybe that percentage goes up at some point.
I'm also not sure we're fully appraised of the downsides.
I think also it's about precedent, isn't it? It's about once you cross these sorts of ethical, medical Rubicons,
what next?
You don't go back. And that's where I think we probably need to... Well, we're discussing it here, which is good, at least.
Yeah.
Right, Emma, school leavers. I think that we're all viewing this at the moment. This is a good news medical story. School leavers can start working as doctors without going to university.
Finally, a brilliant idea has fallen upon us.
And it's a single column on the front page of the Telegraph. I think it's a hugely important
Not
story.
just doctors, but also nurses. I've always thought that it was strange that nurses should require a degree. They never used to, exactly. And I think that... I just think this is a brilliant idea. And generally, I think that too many things now require people to have degrees, like being a police officer. I think as a society, we would be wise to move, and it's a very conservative position, I should add, to move towards an apprenticeship model for as many careers as possible in society, because university used to be for purely academic subjects. And I think that that is the proper purpose of a university. So the more that we can move to an apprenticeship model in all of these areas, it's better for society. I think in many ways provides a much better education because it gives you the practical rather than just the technical skills, where you just have technical understanding and then you apply them. You learn it from somebody who's already mastered the skill of that trade. And also, I think it's better for younger people to go straight from school into a trade, into a career. It will help them to mature faster, and it will probably be good for all sorts of aspects of society, including people being able to settle down and have kids earlier, to afford homes.
They also won't be saddled with huge debts,
exactly.
which is what so many kids get now when they go to university.
£10,000 a year it costs to do a medical degree, and the starting salary is £29,000 a year. So these students will be learning on the job, and they will be earning while they do it.
The only thing is, if they're all living at home, there's going to be a lot of parents who are quite looking forward to getting rid of those teenagers for a few years, Patrick, and now they're going to have them at home.
Well, I think that's perhaps the only disadvantage anyone has yet come
they'll
up
be
with.
earning money, they can move out.
Well, they can pay some rent too.
That's true, and sort of degraduatising is a great idea. And I think that the government finally has reversed this decision that all police officers have to be graduates. I was quite happy to hear one of the British Medical Association bods harumphing about this on the radio, because their monopoly has been broken. And, you know, I'm afraid in many cases these days, young people seem to go to university to learn to hate everything that their parents stand for and become full-time social justice warriors and ultra woke. And I think you detected a bit of that around some of the junior doctors' advocates and representatives, that actually they were almost like the new Scargillites out for an ideological battle with the government. So more common sense, more immersion of bright teenagers into just normal society couldn't be better.
You know, in the 70s, it was a noble thing to leave school and do an apprenticeship. That's what so many people did. There wasn't this great clamour to go to university. And let's be honest, Blair made this so much worse by having that target that all kids, all school leavers, more than 50% had to go to university. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I think as well, if we as a society recognise that these apprenticeships are, you know, it's going to be one in 10 medical students will be able to go through this process. I think if we recognise that this is almost a sort of not necessarily a higher calibre than going into to do a medical degree in the traditional way, but the fact that it's so selective, and to remind people, of course, that it will have all the same requirements as the British Medical Council requires of medical students who go through university. For those people who do apprenticeships to be recognised on the same level as those who have gone through the traditional process, I think that it will be an extremely attractive prospect, and I think it would actually just be better for the soul of society.
I agree.
Just briefly, we've not got that long, but I want to hear what you both think about Donald Trump being found guilty of sexual offences, not rape, having to pay $5 million to this woman. What do you make of it, Patrick?
Well, I think it just underlines Donald Trump's sort of obnoxious conduct and personality. But on the other hand, the fundamentals that will determine the next presidential election might be things like who's best to get the economy going, who's best at border control, who's best at stopping what they know as foreign wars. And on the fundamentals, it may be that Trump still beats Biden. And equally, the Trump diehards, I think part of the appeal of Trump is the idea that he gets under the skin of the establishment. So it might not do him quite as much damage as it probably deserves to.
What do you think, Emma?
He's made of Teflon, isn't he?
He certainly is.
Bounce off. Some of the accusations that have been raised off the back of this, reminding people of the sorts of things that Donald Trump has said in the past, they didn't affect him before. I think it's very unlikely that this is going to affect his, run for president. I've said it before and I'll say it 1,000 times more, I'm sure. I would love it if Ron DeSantis were the next president of the United States.
Happened to him,
Not
Emma?
up to me. I think he is wonderful. However, I don't think that this is really particularly going to damage Donald Trump. And I was actually quite confused by this case because, of course, it was a libel case, and she had said that she'd been raped. The court then found that the court found that she hadn't, but he still lost the libel case. So it's curious to me.
It took a long time for a journalist, because we're quite capable of speaking up for ourselves. Why did it take us so long to bring this out?
Well, that's a valid concern, but it also should be said that, as a civil case, the standard of proof on all fronts is a lot lower. So while the jury wasn't convinced she had been raped, they by no means labelled her a perjurer or anything like that. We'll see how hard Trump appeals, or whether this bluster we hear today is just, again, for the benefit of his die-hard supporters. But yeah, America is such a split society now. I think there still is a path for Donald Trump to stand and win again.
You're right.
OK, Patrick O'Flynn, Emma Webb, thank you for now. In the next few moments, we're going to be hearing from the Reclaim Party, where reports suggest that Andrew Bridgen, MP, could announce that he's defecting from the Conservatives. You do not want to miss that. This is GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth from the Met Office. We'll see more heavy showers across the UK throughout this afternoon that will feel pretty warm in any sunshine. But it's still going to be quite an unsettled day, and that's because we've got low pressure in charge for the next couple of days at least. But as we head into the weekend, we will start to see things settle down. But the area of low pressure is building showers through the afternoon, particularly across northern areas, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But we'll also see some quite slow-moving showers across northern and eastern areas of England too. Showers will move through a little quicker across the southwest, so here we'll see the best of any sunshine. And in the sunshine, it will feel quite warm, particularly across southern areas, highs of up to about 19 degrees. Through this evening, showers will linger across the east, particularly East Anglia could see some quite long-lasting showers into this evening, and we'll see more persistent rain arrive into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. But for many, it will settle down, leaving a relatively dry night, some mist and fog around, and temperatures around average for the time of year overnight by the time we get to Thursday morning. So Thursday morning will start off a little drier, though we could see some cloud lingering around and some drizzly rain across any high ground and some coastal areas. But once the sun gets going into the afternoon, we'll see showers bubble up once again. Now, notice across the east in particular is where we're going to see those showers developing into the afternoon, and they could last quite a while. There's a risk of thunder and hail in there too. But again, in any sunshine, it will feel relatively warm for the time of year. Then through Thursday evening, once again, we'll see showers continue, but this time across more western areas, into parts of South Wales and into southern counties. We'll then start to see this low cloud from the North Sea encroach into eastern areas. But across the west, as we look ahead to the weekend, it will turn drier and brighter. I'll see you later.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 10th of May. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
So, former President Donald Trump sexually assaulted a writer. This is the finding of a jury in a civil case. He says he's never even met E. Jean Carroll and calls it a witch hunt. Do you agree?
And the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is in warfare with the House of Lords, which is trying to block her illegal migration bill. The opposition will be led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby.
And Labour are under pressure over a coalition of chaos as Sir Keir Starmer refuses to rule out a deal with the Lib Dems.
To the former Tory MP, Andrew Bridgen, was kicked out of the party. He is announcing he's joining
the Reclaim Party. We're going to have the first exclusive interview with him to find out why. Let us know your thoughts on that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first of all, here is your news with Bethany.
Good morning, I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom at 11 o'clock. A US jury has found former President Donald Trump sexually abused a magazine writer in the 1990s and then defamed her by branding her a liar. He's been ordered to pay nearly £4 million in damages to the columnist E. Jean Carroll. Mr. Trump will not face a prison sentence as the trial was a civil case. Ms. Carroll said the verdict is a victory for every woman who suffered because she wasn't believed. And Mr. Trump has called it a disgrace and says he'll appeal.
I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. The verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time.
Well, this is just one of several charges that Donald Trump is facing, including an investigation into the Capitol Hill insurrection and election interference in Georgia. US discrimination attorney Gloria Allred says he's garnering support by peddling lies.
He's actually exploiting the fact that he is being investigated, that he is being indicted. He is raising money, millions of dollars, calling himself a victim, it's a witch hunt, and all of the other phrases that he uses time and again. His fundraising off of poor people who believe in him is being investigated also by the special counsel.
Doctors and nurses will soon be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and a third of nurses could be trained via the apprenticeship route in the coming years. The head of the NHS says this gives an opportunity for school leavers to earn while they learn. The expansion of apprenticeships is also said to offer an alternative to a university degree. Andrew Bridgen has announced he's joining the Reclaim Party. The MP for North West Leicestershire was expelled from the Conservatives over a tweet comparing COVID-19 vaccines to the Holocaust. He says he wants to join the Reclaim Party, which is led by Lawrence Fox, to protect free speech. He also claims there's a so-called chasm between Parliament and the people. The UK is set to make Russia's mercenary Wagner Group a prescribed terrorist organisation. That's according to the Times newspaper, which says the move is likely to happen within weeks. The Wagner Group has been fighting alongside Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. The decision would mean it'll be a criminal offence to join and support the group. Similar prescribed organisations include Islamic State and the neo-Nazi group National Action. In Pakistan, almost 1,000 supporters of the former Prime Minister Imran Khan have been arrested since clashes began with police yesterday. The former cricketer was arrested by anti-corruption police, and local media are now reporting his former Secretary-General has also been taken into custody. Over 130 police officials have been injured, 25 police vehicles have been set alight, and dozens of government buildings looted in the Punjab province. Back here, a phone hacking trial involving the Duke of Sussex and the Mirror Group newspapers is set to begin today. Prince Harry will enter the witness box over what he's calling unlawful information gathering. Other celebrities involved include former Girls Aloud singer Cheryl, the estate of George Michael and footballer Ian Wright. But the tabloid is contesting the claims, arguing that some have been brought too late. Documents relating to the decades-old unsolved murder of Daniel Morgan have been discovered by the Metropolitan Police. The paperwork was found in a locked cabinet at New Scotland Yard that apparently hadn't been used for a number of years. The force says some of the material should have been published to the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel when it was conducting its final report in 2021. Daniel John Morgan was a British private investigator who was murdered with an axe in London in 1987. Longer lorries will be allowed on British roads under new government plans to carry more goods with fewer journeys. It'll mean HGVs can be up to 2 metres longer, with a maximum length of up to 61 feet. The government says drivers will be able to move the same amount of goods, but using 8% fewer journeys. The vehicles could be allowed on roads from the 31st of May. The first baby with DNA from 3 people has been born in the UK. The treatment aims to prevent the passing of defective genes from mothers by giving the baby DNA from both parents and a female donor. The fertility regulator says less than 5 babies have been born using the technique. And parts of England have been hit by hailstorms, thunder and flash flooding. Villages in Somerset have been overcome by extreme rushing water in the last 24 hours. The Met Office is warning heavy showers will continue over the next 2 days, with some areas seeing over 4 centimetres of rain in a 3-hour period. Thunderstorm alerts are in place for southern England, East Anglia and parts of the Midlands. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Now, he's a Conservative MP for a very long time, was Andrew Bridgen, but he was kicked out of the party after comparing the COVID vaccines to the Holocaust. He's now joined Laurence Fox Reclaim Party.
That's right. The member for North West Leicestershire said that his expulsion confirmed the culture of corruption, collusion and cover-ups in Westminster, and he joins us now. Good morning, Andrew Bridgen. Lovely to see you. Why the Reclaim Party?
Well, I think you speak your truth, see who hangs around, and you've found your tribe. And I found my tribe with Laurence Fox and the Reclaim Party.
Regrets, Andrew, because you were a Tory, you've been a Tory MP for many years, a member of the Tory party for even longer.
Oh, of course, but I mean, I haven't lost my Conservative values. I think the Conservative Party currently I find unrecognisable. I would challenge you, Andrew, as the great Tory boy you are, to tell me one Conservative thing this government has achieved with an 80-seat majority. It's by far the least Conservative government I've ever served in, and I think it's a huge opportunity lost. I think the Conservative Party has lost its way. It no longer is relatable to the hopes and aspirations of the people, and I think Parliament's lost its way. We seem to have a uniparty. There's no real opposition. And what we do know is that anyone that speaks out against the narrative, as I have done, will be cancelled. I believe we should have a Parliament that legislates for the people. What we've now got is a Parliament that creates problems for the people. And that can't be tolerated. We need to reclaim our democracy, Andrew.
Yeah, right, but you're going to sink without trace, Andrew, aren't you? Because Reclaim, you're the only MP for Reclaim. I don't think they've got any councillors. You are it.
Yeah, but even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. We're going to hit the ground running. There'll be a campaign starting in North West Leicestershire. As you know, my constituency is the heart of England. It's the centre of population, the furthest from the sea. We are Middle England, and we're a good barometer. You'll be surprised. I think there'll be a lot of constituencies asking to put up Reclaim candidates at the next general election. And of course, the longer we go on until the next general election, which I don't think actually will be that long, the more I'm going to be vindicated as further science comes out about the harms and lack of safety and efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccinations. The science is unarguable now.
Andrew, I obviously, as you know, I have some sympathy with your position on the fact that there was so little debate around the rollout of the COVID vaccines indiscriminately for all ages. You and I were both at an all-party parliamentary group together where we listened to doctors talking about the cost and benefits for certain demographics. I would quite like you to still be in the Conservative Party and making some sort of impression from within that unit that possesses more power. Do you look back and regret that you made that comparison? You effectively got kicked out for using a simile. Do you ever wish you'd rephrased that differently?
Well, it wasn't my phrase, actually. It was a Jewish researcher's phrase, which is difficult to see how it possibly could have been anti-Semitic. And as I pointed out to the party, I actually had never had the Twitter code. So I always had my tweets moderated for the last 12 years before they go up. And that one in particular was moderated by my Conservative Association chairman, who then refused to stand up and admit that he'd posted the tweet, not me. It's a very regrettable state of affairs. But as you know, I mean, coming back to the issue of vaccine harms, it's not just vaccine harms. We can't even have a debate in the mother of all parliaments about excess deaths. We can't have a debate about the excess deaths. Last week's figures were 2,540, according to the ONS, excess deaths. That's 22.1% above the rolling 5-year average. And in the mother of all parliaments, we can't have a debate about it. Those are issues that affect every community, in every constituency, and there's only me asking for the debate. There's something gone seriously wrong in our democracy, Bev.
Are you going to ask for a by-election? Well, clearly not. I know the answer to this question. Should you be holding a by-election in your constituency? I think when Anna Soubry stood down or changed parties in 2019, you said that she should have a by-election. Should you?
We're going to have a general election in the next 12 months. I wouldn't want to inflict two in 12 months upon my constituents. We're going to hit the ground and start campaigning straight away. I think as soon as the boundary changes have gone through, I think Rishi Sunak is going to cut and run.
Andrew, what prospect do you have of holding that seat? Because it's a safe Tory seat. I mean, partly down to your hard work there. I mean, what was your majority at the last election?
Well, Andrew, it was a safe Tory seat. And we had control of the district council since I ran the campaign in 2007, and we won the council. 40 years of Labour. We lost the council. This party ejected or expelled their sitting Conservative MP, and my councillors lost with a huge crushing defeat. They lost 10 out of 21 councillors elected in 2019. Effectively, the Labour Party won that election in North West Leicestershire, as shocking as it might be. That's a seat that we returned with a 20,400 majority in 2019, which seems a very long time ago. And so many manifesto pledges have been broken. It's almost unbelievable.
Andrew, there'll be a lot of people wondering why you didn't align yourself or join the Reform Party, Richard Tice's party, probably in terms of independent parties, a little bit better known than Reclaim. Was that an option for you?
It could have been, but ultimately I looked at the policies and looked at the personalities, and I'm afraid the Reform Party and Being Generous have been inconsistent with their policies, particularly around the vaccines, and that was disappointing.
OK, and what? Just give us an idea. You've got a couple of minutes. What's the pitch for Reclaim? What do you stand for? What will that party represent running up to the next election?
The freedom of speech is the basis of our society, the rights and privileges of our democracy. We are for smaller government, letting people earn more money and retain more of their own money. We would certainly get rid of HS2. We do not believe that there is actually a climate emergency. This is, I'm afraid, another sort of propaganda that's been pushed onto the people. We want Parliament to actually represent the views of the people, not some elite around the world who seem to have more power over policy in the House behind me than the people we're supposed to represent. And don't think that Sir Keir Starmer is the answer. He's already said that he prefers to be in Davos than Westminster. That man is not fit to be Prime Minister. There is no real choice out there. What we need is the Reclaim Party will grow very rapidly from North West Leicestershire. We'll have as many candidates as we can manage at the next general election and as many candidates as people want. And I think there's going to be huge demand from a lot of constituencies for Reclaim candidates. And we'll be a genuine alternative to what you're seeing in Parliament now, which is effectively the uniparty on all the major issues that are going to change your lives, which the public have never voted for. The two major parties are in total lockstep, and we're going to be a breath of fresh air.
It's not cheap to launch and run a political party, Andrew. Does Reclaim have the sort of backing required to stand in multiple seats?
Well, that's another problem. I mean, currently, despite Reclaim being a bona fide approved political party for several years with the Electoral Commission, you'll be amazed how we're struggling to get a bank account that will accept donations and memberships. Anybody would think it was some sort of action to stop any competition out there. And this is in Britain in 2023. But hopefully that will be sorted next week. I think we'll have huge demand for memberships. I've already got lots of offers of support. Oh, and by the way, I need to tell you that yesterday I filed in the Court of Justice the defamation claim against Matt Hancock MP, and that's gone live today as well.
OK. Right, Andrew, thank you so much. We
Andrew
need to
Bridgen.
point out, obviously,
Fascinating.
the pharmaceutical companies are not here to defend themselves against accusations that they may be responsible for vaccine injury.
Indeed. And, of course, I think a lot of the money for the Reclaim Party comes from Peter Cruddas, who was a Tory donor for many years and was a big supporter of Boris Johnson. Andrew Bridgen, by the way, will lose his seat. I guarantee it.
Possibly. But you know what? I like a man with values. I'm sorry.
Tom's with us. Olivia's with us. What do you think? Do you think he'll lose his seat?
I think it's fairly obvious he will lose his seat. One of the issues with new parties, particularly parties that are seen to be single-issue parties, they have a big struggle trying to win, particularly at general elections. Of course, UKIP only managed to win one seat at that general election in 2015.
Yeah.
2015 it was, and that was with 16 or 17% of the vote. It really quite extraordinary level of support and name recognition. The problem with Reclaim and a lot of the other parties is we also talk a bit about Reform.
Yeah.
They are bumbling along, maybe at 4 or 5% in the opinion polls. Reclaim nowhere near that. People confuse their names very often.
They do, including
and
me.
Also the big figures in those parties are not sort of seen as national leaders in the big forums of debate. So I think, frankly, getting into that conversation will be a big struggle.
But you know what? If Reclaim are running on a free speech ticket, that is going to be popular to a lot of people who feel that they hear the phrase, you can't say that, all too much, Olivia.
Yes, I mean, what Reclaim has done is very deliberately waded into the culture wars, and the main thing that Reclaim is fighting for, and this is all over their website, is free speech. That is all very well, but as Tom says, that vote is going to be split between the Reform Party and the Reclaim Party, and at the moment, Reform is polling a lot better. The polling for Reclaim is so low, it's pretty much impossible to find out even what they are polling. Lawrence Fox, when he stood to be London Mayor under the Reclaim banner, lost his deposit. He got so few votes. And in the by-election, when Martin Daubney stood in 2021, he only got 375 votes. So it's just... there isn't very much momentum at all behind this party. And although Andrew Bridgen, as he keeps saying, did win the last election with 63% of the vote, and his share of the vote has been going up election by election ever since he first became a Tory MP, there is a tendency among sitting MPs to overestimate their personal vote. And it seems quite likely that that's a Tory vote and it'll come out blue.
He probably gets about 4,000 or 5,000 votes because it's him.
You wonder why he didn't just stand as an independent then? If his constituents like him so much, and some of them will obviously despise his position on the vaccine rollout. Some people will really respect the fact that what he's tried to do is have a conversation about it, and that's what he's been. And people will like that. Some people will like that. I wonder what the pros and cons would have been for him, Tom, of standing as an independent.
We've got an example of this, something that happened in the 2017 election when a lot of Labour MPs and some Conservative MPs split off from their respective parties and formed the Independent Group for Change, a sort of a group of independents that were more loosely associated. That then folded, really, after the European elections when the Lib Dems surged. Some of them split off to join the Liberal Democrats, but others continued on as a more looser group of independents led by a guy called Gavin Shooker. Now, they all lost their seats.
They did.
Despite having been MPs, many of them, for many, many years. And even the ones that went and joined the formidable campaigning machine that was the Liberal Democrats, that has done so well in by-elections, most of them lost their seats when it came to the general election. And perhaps Andrew Bridgen has really missed a trick here by not calling a by-election for himself, because the best chance that these defectors tend to have is in a by-election when the media attention is on them.
Or the exposure they get.
And in a general, there just won't be that sort of exposure.
It's a very good point.
He'll be lost.
And also, talking about these sort of minority fringe parties, if you like, Howard Cox of Fairfield UK has announced today that he's going to stand as London Mayor for the Reform Party. What do you make of that, Olivia?
Well, I was speaking to some of Sadiq Khan's colleagues in City Hall, and they were actually saying that what they're worried about are independent candidates. They're not worried about the threat from the Tories in London. There just isn't a Tory presence in London. But in those outer London boroughs, those places which are really badly affected by ULEZ, and the commuter towns, which do tend to be more conservative thinking by nature, what they're worried about is a big storm of Labour in central London versus an independent candidate on the fringes of London. But would Howard Cox be a big enough name? What the person I was talking to said, if someone like Jeremy Clarkson, for example, decided to stand as an independent candidate, he could easily win those out boroughs, but it needs to be a celebrity.
What about the former Labour leader standing as an independent? He's been booted out of the Parliamentary Party. Jeremy Corbyn, he's a London MP, London Mayor candidate. That would be fascinating, because don't forget, Ken Livingstone won the first mayoral contest as an independent against the official Labour candidate, Frank Dobson.
I mean, he does have his followers, certainly. That there might be an issue with him covering too much of the same ground as Sadiq Khan in central London. What Sadiq Khan's people are very, very worried about is some sort of charismatic personality taking on Sadiq Khan, because Sadiq Khan, he's a lawyer. He does things very rigorously, but charisma isn't perhaps the first adjective you'd use to describe him. So that is the danger for them. So far, that threat doesn't really seem to have emerged.
No.
What do you
the
think,
other
John?
thing to remember about the next elections in London is, for the first time in the history of this set of elections for the mayor, it'll be under first past the post. The person who gets the most votes will win, and there won't be any transfers and top-ups. And that means that potentially there could be a route for someone to come through the middle. If perhaps Jeremy Corbyn were to stand and split the Labour vote, someone could come in through the middle. We saw the Greens doing very well, better than expected last time round. Sadiq Khan didn't get above 50% in that first round, unlike other Labour mayors, unlike people like Andy Burnham, who soared ahead with huge approval ratings. Sadiq Khan didn't have that kind of hold over London in the last time that this election was up. And people were surprised, actually, that the Conservative candidate did better than expected. So potentially it's not as much in the bag for the Labour Party as people might have thought, given this particular change of the voting system.
And he's been around a long time, Sadiq Khan. We've had
7 years, isn't it? 7 or 8 years.
So he'll be running for a third term, and people might just think time for a change.
They might. That said, London really is a very, very Labour city and seems to be getting more Labour by the year. I agree with Tom that there is a chance under the new voting system that if the Labour vote got split and then a sort of charismatic independent candidate who was against ULEZ, for example, who spoke up for those boroughs around the centre of London came in, then there is a little chance, there is a pathway to victory for someone who's not Sadiq Khan. But from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty narrow.
Boris Johnson could be persuaded to run for his old job? Now, there's a thought. There's a thought, because he's not going to be Prime Minister, in my view, and he's a big opponent of the low emissions act.
He is, however, he might have burnt some bridges with regard to metropolitan London that he carried so heavily in 2008 and 2012. Perhaps he's burnt those bridges by becoming the non-London champion, the Red Wall champion. Perhaps he's no longer the guy for that. But the other thing, of course, is that the barrier to entry to become a candidate, to get on that ballot is relatively low. The number of candidates that stood last time was huge. You had 2 YouTubers standing as joke candidates.
That's right.
You had an enormous number of sort of start-up parties that were all sort of single issue.
Yeah.
The ballot paper was very, very long. So for an independent candidate to get the attention
I quite fancy it, Tom,
that would
to
be
be honest.
required would be a task.
Do it,
I quite fancy it.
Is this the
Would you
manifesto?
support me?
Are we having the manifesto launch here?
No, I'm excited by Howard Cox taking on this because I think, if nothing else, if he doesn't get elected, he will raise awareness of the harms of the ULEZ, of the low-traffic neighbourhoods, and what they're doing to people that cannot afford to upgrade their cars, changing fundamentally the freedoms that we have to move around our city. If he can cut through with that, Olivia, I'm all right. I'm OK with that. You know.
Well, yeah, and I think there is definitely a benefit in having, as Tom says, the barrier to entry is very low, but having lots of different candidates who speak up for all sorts of different issues tends to make the mayoral election relatively interesting. And obviously London is such a pluralistic city that it is quite good to have all sorts of different voices.
We need a change.
We need a change.
We really do.
We're going to take a little change, but don't go anywhere. Still to come, it's the Archbishop versus the government as Justin Welby starts a political battle with Number 10 over migrants. This is To the Point.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11:28. You're with GB News To the Point with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. People have been getting in touch.
They certainly have. And a lot of people are very cross about the Archbishop of Canterbury poking his nose in
Not
the
as cross as
Great
you.
Migrant. I can't bear him. I'm sorry, I can't
You
stand
spent
him.
much time with him?
Yeah. I had lunch with him. It wasn't a great success. It wasn't a
Who
great
paid?
success. It was at Lambeth Palace, his official residence, which is a very nice place, and he spent most of it slagging off the Daily Mail, knowing I work for the Daily Mail.
It all becomes clear. I thought there was a bit of history here. There's a backstory to your dislike of Justin Welby.
Church attendance in this country, in the Anglican Church, is at an all-time low.
This is true.
Churches are closing all over the country, and you've got an Archbishop of Canterbury wading into the House of Lords today, politically, calling the government's policy immoral to try to move refugees to Rwanda to try and stop the illegal trade across the Channel. It is not immoral. It's just a desperate attempt to solve the situation.
Do you think people don't go to church, though, because of what he says about migrants?
I think they don't go to church because they look at people like Welby and there's no spiritual leadership.
OK.
Where's the spiritual leadership from him?
I guess he would
Is
say...
he inspirational?
Well, he would say this is what I have a problem with. He's all fine. Tell us it's unethical, but tell us the alternative.
Quite.
Tell us what's unethical. Tell us about the morality. We saw Richard Drex, the MP that was in this morning, just a little earlier. If you missed it, catch up on the app, because it was a brilliant interview. Great MP. What a brilliant interview, she says. No, I mean, he was brilliant, not that we were brilliant. But what he said was really insightful, to be in charge of that constituency, where they're having the boat with 500 migrants, a boat that's able to house about 200, and the effect that might have on his local community. Tell me what's ethical about that to the local people.
But the church person I'd listen to more is the Archbishop of Rwanda, who is a former refugee, who says the policy is not immoral and he supports it.
And he lives in Rwanda.
And he lives in Rwanda, and he has been a refugee. He was a refugee during the great genocide in the 90s in Rwanda. I think he's got more authority here than the old Etonian Justin Welby.
Some breaking news from the High Court. The publisher of the Mirror newspaper has admitted that there is some evidence of unlawful information gathering in relation to a High Court challenge brought by the Duke of Sussex that warrants compensation.
In court documents released at the start of the trial in London, Mirror Group newspaper says it unreservedly apologises for instances of unlawful information gathering, which the publisher says will never be repeated.
That's right. The statements form part of the publisher's defence to claims brought by Harry and other individuals over alleged unlawful information gathering at MGN titles. We're going to bring you more on that in just a moment. That's going to cost them a lot of money.
Yeah, they've already paid out money to other people who alleged there was phone hacking, and of course we shouldn't forget the name that's involved in all this. Piers Morgan was editor of the Daily Mirror, I think, during some of these alleged. Well, he was editor of the Daily Mirror for a very long time.
Well, I'd like to know what he's saying about it, but he's blocked me on Twitter, so I can't read it. Now, still to come, there's a call to tackle Britain's so-called obesity. Not so-called, it is an obesity crisis.
It certainly is.
We'll bring you all the details after your morning's news with Bethany Elsey.
Andrew, Bev, thank you. Good morning. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 11:30. A US jury has found former President Donald Trump sexually abused a magazine writer in the 1990s and then defamed her by branding her a liar. He's been ordered to pay nearly £4 million in damages to the columnist E. Jean Carroll. Mr. Trump will not face a prison sentence as the trial was a civil case. Ms. Carroll said the verdict is a victory for every woman who suffered because she was not believed. Mr. Trump has called it a disgrace and said he'll appeal. Doctors and nurses will soon be able to train on the job amid plans to tackle NHS workforce shortages. Up to 1 in 10 doctors and nurses and a third of nurses could be trained via the apprenticeship route in the coming years. The head of the NHS says this gives an opportunity for school leavers to earn while they learn. And as you've been hearing, some breaking news in the last couple of minutes. The publisher of the Mirror newspaper has admitted there is some evidence of unlawful information gathering in relation to a High Court challenge brought by the Duke of Sussex. On the opening day of the case, the tabloid also admitted that some of the claims warrant compensation. Prince Harry will enter the witness box today over alleged phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers. Other celebrities involved in the trial include former Girls Aloud singer Cheryl, the estate of George Michael and former footballer Ian Wright. The number of households in temporary accommodation has reached more than 100,000. That's the highest level in nearly 20 years. Official figures show more than 101,000 households were living in short-term accommodation at the end of December, a figure not seen since 2004. It's an increase of 5.2% from the year before. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2627 and €1.1521. The price of gold is £1,608.60 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,746 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:37. You were to the point on GB News.
Well, joining us now to go through the day's top stories, columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn and director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Right, we've been talking about immigration in this country this morning, Patrick, and the fact that the immigration bill is going to go through the House of Lords, going to hit some stumbles on the way, no doubt. I think what's happening in America is going to make our situation look like small fry. So this is Title 42, which is basically loses its power tomorrow. What is this going to mean for the American situation in terms of illegal immigration?
Well, it's a very interesting parallel because Title 42 on medical grounds about preventing COVID spreading kind of achieved very quickly what the government here wants to be able to achieve with its illegal migration bill, which is the right to expel very quickly people who have arrived illegally. Now, the medical grounds obviously lapsing in the US, and the scale of what they're facing, many thousands of crossings per day. I think so far crossing the channel on the small boats on the worst day has been a little over 1,000 a day. For a country of our size and population density, that's quite something and unmanageable. But America could be bracing for something 15 times that. And it just
15,000 in a day crossing the border from Mexico.
That seems to be perfectly possible.
They're literally queuing now, like 20 deep, to wait.
And it seems that the American government are actually encouraging them to do so, which is so. It's a strange situation. It seems that so there's this idea of having an app that would allow people to have an alternative route to seek asylum in the States. But if you have, as soon as this Title 42 expires, if you then have at least, shall we say, a minimum of 13,000 people crossing the border from Mexico per day, you wouldn't want to live in Texas, would you?
No.
I mean, you don't necessarily know who these people are coming across the border. We know that Mexico has all sorts of problems with serious crime, drug trafficking, that kind of thing. So it is, as you were saying, it's an interesting parallel with the situation that we have here, because they are also having to sort of deal with...
Sorry to interrupt you, Emma, but we're looking at some of the pictures there of the camps. There are literally camps on the border now of people just waiting for this expiration.
This is going to be a gift for Donald Trump. Who is very strong about what... Remember, build the wall, build the fence.
Yeah, and I suppose in the American context, the conventional wisdom has been they're much more relaxed and open to immigration as a migrant nation, the American dream, the Statue of Liberty slogan about bring us your whatever it was dispossessed from around the world. But in America too now, the anxiety about the scale potentially of illegal migration from much poorer countries, in their case below the southern border, is huge. And Donald Trump has traction on it because Donald Trump is one of the few people who's prepared to say what the average Joe thinks about it.
And obviously as well, because this Title 42 is a public health policy. It's not an explicitly migration policy. But by allowing this to expire, and Biden has recognised there's going to be chaos on the border, this is all going to be very disorganised, it's not going to be good for those living on the American side of the border. I think the fact that he hasn't put anything robust in place to deal with this is really going to be a curse to the Democratic Party.
It certainly is.
So whether it's Donald Trump or another candidate, this is going to be a gift.
And hasn't he put his hapless vice president in charge of migration issues, Kamala Harris, who can't string a sentence together at the best of times? I mean, this is going to really finish her off, isn't it? Yeah.
I think Kamala Harris's tactic to become president of the United States is just to be vice president again, hope that Biden gets in and then bank on him not lasting a term, which might not be the worst strategy in the world given her basic unelectability.
This is a huge story, though, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think it's fascinating that it's barely made it into the American press.
But it
Biden has such a stranglehold, it feels, on the American media that it's not really penetrating into the American press, and barely here.
I suspect it will, though, because I think
it's going to have to.
13, 15,000 a day. And if they estimate that, it'll be a lot more. Patrick, we remember when enlargement of the European Union, we were going to have Eastern Europeans coming here. Robin Cook told us there'd be only 15,000 from Poland in the first year. It was 750,000.
Absolutely, a grotesque underestimate of the basic attraction of moving to a high living standards country with a welfare state. If you're from a low living standards country, without that social protection, it's a massive draw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. We might try and cover this again tomorrow. Right, Emma. Increasing demands to address Britain's catastrophic obesity crisis. 7,000 needless diabetes deaths every year.
This is, it's a terribly sad story, and this has obviously got so much to do with the state that the NHS is in. 15% diabetes deaths are up 15% on last year. And it's been described as the fastest growing health emergency, and people are being left alone to basically manage their diabetes. Many people saying that they feel that their diabetes are not under control, they're struggling to control them. Less than half of people with diabetes received the required checks in the last year. And there are also huge variations regionally. So if it's totally luck of the draw. If you happen to live in an area where the health system is working properly, then you're much less likely to be at risk. In some places, it seems that people are just sort of being left to their own devices. And the complications of diabetes are really quite serious. I mean, other than death, of course, problems with eyesight, problems with your limbs, amputation, kidney failure, strokes, heart disease. So this is really serious. And also, in addition to that, lots of people who don't necessarily even know that they have diabetes. So it's yet further proof that the NHS is completely failing the people of this country. And I will keep hammering it home. I think that we have a universal lack of healthcare until we sort this out, rather than universal healthcare free at the point of entry.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say it's a slightly harsh to blame it on the NHS, because there's an element of personal responsibility.
I'm glad you said
that. And any healthcare system would struggle in the face of the proportion of the British people now who, for many years, have taken no steps, no
eating the wrong food, no exercise.
Although, of course, the food industry pumps this out with perhaps not enough controls. And one thing you can say about the NHS model, I suppose, is it doesn't encourage personal responsibility, because you can turn up, quotes, and get free, though it's not free for the taxpayers' treatment, rather than having to make an investment in your own health.
And because it's so overstretched, it's very easy for people to fall off of the wagon and to not get the treatment that they need, to not get the checks that they need.
That's right. It's a shorter show today, guys, because it's PMQs, of course. But thank you, Patrick O'Flynn, Emma Webb, as usual. Right, it has flown by. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. This is The Point with Andrew and Bev. We'll be back tomorrow at 9:30.
Yeah, see you then.
All being well.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth from the Met Office. We'll see more heavy showers across the UK throughout this afternoon that will feel pretty warm in any sunshine. But it's still going to be quite an unsettled day, and that's because we've got low pressure in charge for the next couple of days at least. But as we head into the weekend, we will start to see things settle down. But the area of low pressure is building showers through the afternoon, particularly across northern areas, across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But we'll also see some quite slow-moving showers across northern and eastern areas of England too. Showers will move through a little quicker across the southwest, so here we'll see the best of any sunshine. And in the sunshine, it will feel quite warm, particularly across southern areas, highs of up to about 19 degrees. Through this evening, showers will linger across the east, particularly East Anglia could see some quite long-lasting showers into this evening, and we'll see more persistent rain arrive into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. But for many, it will settle down, leaving a relatively dry night, some mist and fog around, and temperatures around average for the time of year overnight by the time we get to Thursday morning. So Thursday morning will start off a little drier, though we could see some cloud lingering around and some drizzly rain across any high ground and some coastal areas. But once the sun gets going into the afternoon, we'll see showers bubble up once again. Now, notice across the east in particular is where we're going to see those showers developing into the afternoon, and they could last quite a while. There's a risk of thunder and hail in there too. But again, in any sunshine, it will feel relatively warm for the time of year. Then through Thursday,